I thought he might be AI. I was pretty sure he was a player, but it turned out he was really into my work. Last spring, I matched on Bumble with someone who had some kind of weirdly robotic responses in the beginning, and his photos were a little too polished. So I thought maybe he wasn't real. And I put off meeting him for a little bit. When I finally set a time frame, out of nowhere, he sent me a message saying, read an interesting article on ADHD prevalence in the African American community and thought of you. Looking forward to connecting and talking about your work. And I was like, oh, so this dude actually knows what I'm about. So when we went on our first date, it felt more like an interview than a date. So in the end, I said I was cool with hanging out again, but probably more as friends, especially because I thought I'd made a really deep connection earlier that week. On our second date, he shared about his philanthropy and his patronage of the arts and mentioned a pretty big day at his business, but he didn't say what he actually did. He did mention the name though, so when I Googled it, I realized it was a pretty big deal because it was a huge day for their company, all over Forbes, and he was part of funding for this multi-billion-dollar health tech company. And yet he'd taken time out of his day to go for a walk with me. It took a while to line up for our third date because we both were traveling and he kept rescheduling. So when we finally did connect in August, he asked what I was up to. I told him I'd taken a break from the apps. He said, yeah, because you have a boyfriend. And I said, no, that didn't work out. He looked shocked and said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, I would have, but you kept canceling. And so then he took some time to pause and said something about wanting to be cautious about not messing up the friendship. But he did say he'd take me out to dinner after my camp, but instead ghosted me for 2 weeks. We ended up mostly just being friends, and while there was a little bit of chemistry, it was mostly an intellectual connection that kind of tickled my brain in a very specific way because we had such interestingly different perspectives, but the ability to understand what the other one was saying. At one point, he mentioned that he thought he might be autistic, and that wouldn't surprise me, but if he is, then one of his special interests is dating.